In this episode, we will build on what we learned in the previous ones, starting with this section of restaurants list with their rating. Here's the markup. First, restaurant details with an image, the information div and the rating div. And here's the second restaurant details. As you can see, we need 3 columns, 1, 2, and 3. I encourage you to pause this video for a moment and try creating this grid structure on your own. I'll continue. This is what it looks like without grid. Go to the code, scroll up to the styles, make this section a grid container using display grid. To specify the columns, let's use grid template columns, auto for the image column, 1FR for the details column, and auto again for the ratings column. I hope you were able to arrive at this by yourself. It's okay even if you couldn't. Let's add some gap as well. Row gap of 1.5 rem and then a column gap of 1 rem. The structure looks perfect. We need to work on the alignment though. If you observe the mockup, this text needs to be vertically centered with respect to the image. Do you remember the property we just used for vertical alignment of content within all the cells? If you said align items, you got it right. So let's try that. Align items, center. The text is aligned vertically alright, but the rating also appears at the center vertically. We want the rating to be aligned at the top itself. So the requirement now is such that we need different vertical alignment for different items. Until now, all the CSS properties we saw were applied directly to the parent container. This time, let's learn about a property that can be used on an individual grid item instead. We can leave this as it is and change the vertical alignment of only the rating div. So select the rating class and use the property align self with the value start to align only these items' contents to the top. This works. Only one last thing to do is to align these stars to the right. Once again, we need the alignment only for this column. But this time, it's horizontal alignment. The way the property align self works for vertical alignment, the property justify self works for horizontal alignment, and in our case, the value would be end. This is perfect. If you were wondering why we didn't use text aligned right on this rating, that works as well because we are using fonts for generating the star icons, but if we use images, text align property doesn't work. Going back to the code, there's another way you could achieve the same result. We first used align items center for all grid items. We can actually remove this right now and use align self only on the info items. Like this. Select info, align self, center, because that's the only content we need center aligned. Now, the align self start can be removed because by default the content was at the top. Verify it once? Yes, this also works. Depending on the layout, you can choose whichever works best for you. Let's look at another example to apply the knowledge we just learned. This profile card looks really simple. It's just a div with 4 items at each corner. But it's not that simple when you try to implement it. Let's start from the beginning. Here's the markup. A card div within which we have name, image, contact number, and social icons. Without grid, this is what it looks like. First, let's turn this card div into a 2x2 grid. Scroll up to the card styles, add display grid, and grid template columns, auto. Immediately, we have something like this. Let's inspect to see the grid lines. Since the columns and the rows have auto width, we now know that the additional space gets distributed evenly, and that's what has happened. But what we need is the columns and rows to occupy minimum space required and space out maximum. Based on what we have learnt about spacing between columns and rows, we can use the properties justify content, space between value, and align content, again space between value. This is to space out the columns and this is to space out the rows, or we can combine the two and simply use place content space between. Since both the values are same, we just need to specify one single value. Now let's see what we have. Great progress. All 4 elements are in the right places but not aligned exactly as needed. Starting from the top, we want the name to be vertically centered within the cell, that is vertically centered with respect to the image. Now we know we can vertically center a single item using align self center. Let's do that. H3 align self center, and this is done. Now we need this contact number to be aligned at the bottom of the cell. Once again, use align self property on the small element this time. Small align self end. This works. One last change we need is to align this image to the right. So for horizontal alignment of a particular item, we can use justify self on the image, justify self end again. And now it's done. To quickly summarize what we just saw, justify self and align self are CSS properties that could be used on individual items of a grid and not on the grid container. Justify self is for horizontal alignment, while align self is for vertical alignment of the content within the cell.